All right. So happy disclaimer. Welcome to the Hall of Flame. I have people slide up into my DMs after each of these lessons and let me know, like, you were kind of harsh. I feel attacked, or sending me the Michael Jordan meme of, and I took that personally. And my intention is not to do that on a way to, wreck your ego or anything like that. My intention is to help you grow and develop, not just as a trader, but also as a person. So as it feels like I may be delivering the Comedy Central roast of crypto traders, that is not ever my intention, but that's how we deliver the tough love sometimes, right? So I want to go ahead and get into it. So if you have that list of biases that I asked you to work on, when you look at that list, and if you don't remember those, some of those examples were loss aversion or regret aversion bias, status quo bias, optimism or pessimism bias, etc. Your most encountered bias will be the biggest cue of your self-sabotaging or self-destructive behavior. So if you have had the opportunity to look at which one of those biases was the quote unquote most harmful, not just to your P&L, but also to your mental health, that would be an area to look at. If you can't remember which of those biases or what we had, I just wanted to run through them real quick with you. Confirmation bias, self-control bias, loss aversion bias, familiarity bias, regret aversion, status quo bias, overconfidence bias, sunken cost fallacy or sunk cost bias, endowment bias, recency bias, buyer Stockholm syndrome. That's one of my favorites. Post-purchase rationalization, attribution bias, illusion of control. I think this was a big one for many people. Hindsight bias, another big one. Optimism or pessimism bias, right? So out of those biases that we were looking at, or that you may have been charting, your most encountered one, the one that you saw yourself engage in with the most, will be the biggest cue of where you should start working on in order to get yourself back on track. Likewise, from previous lessons, each week I've been asking you to work on addressing and balance in your life by focusing on a different area of wellness in our wellness wheel. Whichever one that you've been putting off, I'm here to shed light to you that this is an area of self-sabotage for you, because we like to do the things that we want to do, and we likely or neurotypically save what we dread for last. We will actively avoid it. We will start doing things like laundry and chores and dishes instead of addressing our truth. So of the previous lessons that I've given you, if you've identified your bias, or if you have been keeping up with us on the wellness wheel, whatever area you neglected there is an area that you are self-sabotaging yourself. If you did the self-discipline structure exercise, have you identified which category was the hardest to complete or to stick to? I'm not going to pull that one up right now, actually, but I will repost it in Academy resources or Academy chat if you don't know what I'm referring to. So if in that area, we talked about the STAR method, which is a situation, task, action, and repeat, right? So in addition to that, we were told that we can change 3 circumstances in our life: our surroundings, the people we're around, or how we use our time on our calendar. So if you are sabotaging yourself with your scheduling, if you scheduled it for things that were too ambitious or you haven't made time, then you're lacking self-discipline with time management. You're sabotaging your time. If your first action, if you couldn't take that baby step, the very first thing you needed to do in order to get done, then you are likely to have perfectionist issues or procrastination issues. If the resistance portion, where I asked you to write down what negative thought patterns you were telling yourself of why you couldn't get things done, what are the excuses that pop up into your head? Just like we have support and resistance in charts, we have those psychologically. If you're experiencing that resistance, then what you're doing is you're perpetuating negative thought patterns, which is just bringing more negativity into your life. And if affirmations, the part where we said we gave a list of coaching or positive words or phrases that you could repeat to yourself to help replace those negative thought patterns. If you are slacking on this area, then you may be a person who is hypercritical, not just of yourself, but of others in your life. And you allow your inner critic to silence your inner coach, the person who should be contributing to you positively, right? Depriving your inner child of encouragement and positive reinforcement that would bring the growth and consistency needed for your trading. Where'd you learn that one, bud? You're made of spare parts, aren't you, bud? If you haven't done that self-discipline exercise, it's something that I think translates to a lot of areas in life, and I would highly recommend it before going into or understanding where you're self-sabotaging. We raised our hands, sir. Go ahead and speak up if you'd like, unless it was an accident. Let me see. There's another Winfred. All right, fam. I don't know how that happened. We'll keep moving. We'll keep it moving. Keep it pushing. Okay, so in each lesson, I propose a statement that you can ask yourself before you go into a trading session in order to evaluate whether or not you are mentally sound or trading under the influence. Those previous words were, do I control my thoughts or do my thoughts control me? Do I control my emotions or do my emotions control me? Am I in control of my emotion, of my actions? Are my actions helpful or harmful to me? That's the difference between self-discipline and self-sabotage. And are my behaviors aligned with my long-term goals? That's the one we want to work on here, because traders can be their own worst enemies, or you can be your own best friend. Kick this impersonator. If I had to place a bet right now on my dual Winfred, I'd say Taito all day. But what is self-sabotage even when I'm saying this word? What am I referring to? So self-sabotage is when we are actively or passively taking steps to prevent ourselves from reaching our goals. Behavior is self-sabotaging when it creates problems in your daily life or is interfering with your goals for your long-term life or long-standing goals. The difference between something being active and passive here is it being a physical action and it being a thought. So when you're thinking about actively self-sabotaging yourself, this is behaviors that are holding you back, like binge watching Netflix instead of working on your side hustle or something you have an ambition towards. Whereas passive self-sabotage is harder to spot and also harder to control because it's not a physical action. You're preventing yourself from doing what you want to do, but usually in a mental capacity via unconscious thoughts, patterns that you've developed in the past to deal with hardships in your life, essentially. If you have a moment to write down in your notes, which one of these you think you participate in more? Which one is more of a struggle for you? Active self-sabotage, where you aren't physically doing the tasks that you need to do, or passive? Last week, I gave the example of with self-discipline, my friend who's a personal trainer, how he just has people drive to the gym and that's it, and then drive home before they actually start working out. If half of life is just showing up, but you can't show up, maybe active self-sabotage is your area for improvement. If you're somebody who can go through the motions, but you're slowly dying on the inside, you're a person who's probably struggling more with the mental or emotional side, which is passive self-sabotage. If you aren't sure which one of these correlates to you more, here are some things that you might notice or be able to take from your trading. Some examples of self-sabotage in trading: it can play out via not having a trade plan, right? We talked about failing to plan is planning to fail. This is when you actively allow your emotions to get the best of you because you have not determined your two areas where you should be entering or exiting a trade, the stop loss or a take profit, right? If you have those components, you can follow the logic and remove the emotional struggle. Another area or example of self-sabotage is not understanding or taking the time to calculate your risk tolerance or improperly identified risk tolerance. I've created a document for you guys that I will be sharing in the chat here. And it's basically showing capital exposure and risk management. I made this PDF. Okay, I don't know if it's just going to show. There we go. You're welcome to that. Essentially, it shows you capital exposure and risk management guidelines in akin to your account size and how you should be using it. I did this based off of, it's mostly spot because when you're using margin or leverage, that can mess with your numbers, but it's a good basic starter point for anybody who is needing that. All right. So if you aren't taking the time to understand your capital exposure, or you're improperly managing your risk, and you aren't having a trade plan, these are examples of self-sabotage. The biggest one here is fear. Just point blank, period, fear of anything, fear of losing money, fear of making the wrong trade, fear of cutting your trade too soon, fear of greed, fear of anything. This is one of the worst forms of passive self-sabotage. And lack of balance, which really is sort of different in that it's more active than passive, is you can be having an imbalance in your life in those 7 areas of wellness, or in instability within yourself. If you aren't balanced and taking care of yourself, basic sleep, hygiene, eat right, vegetables, etc., you can actually be manifesting behaviors that are going to correlate with depression, anxiety, etc., unstable mood. You might be self-sabotaging yourself by not knowing when to exit a trade, by never learning or finding your own style, or being a chameleon. Maybe you're constantly copying somebody. Okay. Sorry, y'all. Give me a second to handle something. Okay. All right, so if you're never learning or finding your own style, and you're just copying people from the server or Discord, or maybe you become super obsessed with one certain mentor, maybe you become obsessed with Stefan and you only trade with a 7-Eleven philosophy, or you become obsessed with ICT and you only are doing ICT strategies, or whomever, whatever, you are finding one particular style and mimicking it, that is actually going to be detriment, self-sabotaging to your character, not just as a trader, but as a person, because you are devaluing yourself by not giving yourself the opportunity to explore and decide for yourself and find out which way that you are going to be the most successful, if that makes sense. You can be over trading or under trading, which is going to be, all right, hold on. Okay. Took care of that nonsense with Winfred. Thank you for your patience. If you're over trading or under trading, if you're doing revenge trading at all, if you're blindly following alerts, mostly out of the fear that your plays will be inferior, like I talked about, or if you have those certain biases where you're removing the accountability for yourself, which means that if it wins, you tend to take on the bias that it was because of you. If you lose, then, oh, it was the other person, it was the analyst, they put forth a bad trade, right? If you're wanting to know whether or not you're actively self-sabotaging yourself beyond your trading or within your trading, you can ask yourself, am I a person who is seeking instant gratification? Am I demonstrating traits of impatience? Am I doing what is easy or what feels good in the now instead of the long run? Am I acting against my own best interests, sometimes unconsciously, right? Am I procrastinating with things? This is fun. Thank you. Love always have a good time. All right, I don't want to block people by IP, but ain't nobody got time for this. I don't have the mental energy for that. All right. If you are self-medicating with drugs, alcohol, comfort food, or other behaviors that are harmful to yourself, you may be self-sabotaging. If you have a negative or pessimistic thought patterns, something that might have happened to you in the past is that perhaps you were used to being let down by people that you were supposed to be able to trust in your life. If that happened to you, then you tend to develop numerous patterns of not relying on people, essentially. I call it Drake, trust issues, right? So in return, you might not want or expect much from others. And you may be projecting these pessimistic biases or thought patterns onto the market. Like the market's going to crash. You're going to be the perfect person that people can inverse, because if you have a pessimism bias, you're going to be like, the market's going to crash when it's really going to bounce. Or once you finally turn bull and decide you're going to quote unquote trust the market or go with the plan, then it will go against you in that sort of a state of mind. So if you're having those thought patterns, those are the people who come in to complain and say X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 but they aren't taking accountability for themselves. Then there's a perfectionism mindset in which if you can't do something perfectly or have absolute knowledge behind it, you refuse to engage. An example of this is we used to have somebody in the server who was a really good analyst and trader. And I was like, dude, you need to teach, you need to teach. And they were too uncomfortable with the concept of teaching because they still felt like I have so much more to learn, right? But even if you aren't perfect and have absolute knowledge, which there's no end game for, right? Nobody can ever totally master their knowledge or have an end game when it comes to mastery or be perfect in and of itself. You can be, nah, so I'm not talking about you. I mean, I do wish you would teach, to be honest, but yeah, if you're doing that, then there are people who have less knowledge from you or different knowledge that you are actually self-sabotaging, not just yourself, but your possible relationship and growth with others by being willing to put yourself out there. People do this oftentimes too when they start in a new job or in a new career field, or if they start trading crypto for the first time. When you're get over that hump of doing it, you kind of feel a little bit of like imposter syndrome. Like, do I really know what I'm doing? Or if you haven't made call outs, or if you don't make call outs, you might be afraid of looking foolish, making a mistake, or appearing incompetent, right? When the call out bot, the true purpose of it is for you to monitor your trades, right? And be accountable for your trades and also be able to share them with other people, which is what a community is all about. So what you ultimately wind up doing is failing when you are not willing to see the truth and or having the guts to face it or to grow, right? You fail by never challenging yourself to grow. This is the only way in which you fail, because even if you try and you fail, then you tried it, right? Why do we do this? This is going to start to feel like a therapy session. It's not my intention. As I said at the beginning, welcome to the Hall of Flame. This stuff is normal for everybody because self-discipline and self-sabotage does not come naturally or normally, right? So one of the reasons we self-sabotage in our trading is that we're repeating unhealthy patterns from our childhood. I already discussed that if you were put down before, then you can be doing that. Or if you had severe hardships in your family life or trauma, what is familiar to you is actually what feels safe to you, because familiarity equals safety in our brain. So our subconscious repeats that comfortable, quote unquote, pattern, even if it's not what's best for us, because that's what determines what a sense of normalcy is for us. So if you think about those people you see who are in like super toxic relationships and you're like, why do they not see this? How do they not realize this? Or why are they doing this? Those people are doing it because even if it doesn't seem healthiest, right? It's giving people a bit of instant gratification. It's giving people comfort. It's giving people familiarity. Recreating the old dynamics is really powerful for what people feel is best for themselves, but it might not be. Low self-esteem, so no confidence or lack of discipline. If you have low self-esteem, you might feel like you don't deserve success, or you might feel unworthy of being good at this. You might not even have faith in yourself that once you've tried that you could ever get good. There are people who have paid for memberships, who have gone to mentorships, and if you aren't willing and able to be receptive or able to be open-minded with your approach to trading, right? And you don't feel like you're deserving of that success, then you are, again, what are you doing? Perpetuating those negative thought patterns. Another reason is perhaps you're growing up with a parent whom was self-hating. This can be a parent who has viewed themselves as weak or as a failure. Perhaps you had a parent or an adult in your household who was critical of appearance, critical or easily self-conscious, maybe socially unsure of themselves. And so without having an example of how to emulate positivity, strength, etc., you may be unconsciously replicating what you were shown by your parents. You could have been growing up with a parent whom was abandoning or neglecting of you, or not able to provide for your not just physical needs, but also emotional needs. There's that Drake again, trust issues, right? You can also learn to have difficulty self-advocating because you look at what the family or the group needs as a whole, and then you are having trouble with putting yourself first, right? Or even being able to say and speak about what you need and what you want. You could be over, or you could have had a parent or an authority figure who was overbearing or intrusive. So somebody who was always in your space, somebody you feel like you couldn't trust, somebody who you felt suffocated by. What they were doing was they were projecting their needs and their things that they needed as an individual onto you as well. So if you didn't have the overbearing parent, you might have had the helpless parent whom you had to in turn do some role reversal to and sort of show up for them in life. And so you fulfill this need for yourself as putting other people first instead of doing what you needed or talking about what you needed. You become closed off to the world if you had a parent who was any of these things, because you can like have analysis paralysis and get stuck in your own head. How does any of this relate to your trading? All of it relates to your trading, because if you have chronic trust issues or commitment issues and things like that, then you're going to go into things like highly speculative trades or trades without plans, and you're going to perpetuate the cycle of self-sabotage of things not working out for you, etc., based on some of these underlying issues, right? So what we have to do is we have to start learning to differentiate between the voices that we hear in our head when we have somebody who is the shadow self, which is a concept in philosophy and psychology, usually perpetuated by Carl Jung. If you're familiar with Jungian psychology, he refers to this as the anti-self or the shadow self or the idealized self. So this is your inner critic and this is your inner coach. So I have here Emperor's New Groove, BT Dubs, highly underrated Disney movie. I'm going to put that out there, but your anti-self or your shadow self and your idealized self both exist to do what? Balance each other. So we're never trying to fully get rid of this person, this guy, this thought process, our shadow self, because it's meant to provide another perspective for us. It's meant to, or trying to at least, keep us quote unquote safe, or what we feel as safe, right? If you think of the yin and yang symbol, that shows you the darkness within the light and the light within the darkness. So we always want to have these multiple concepts here because it brings us balance. But you have to understand the difference between the two so that when you are hearing that, listening to that, and experiencing that in your trading, you know who and what to listen to, and you actively can change your trading. The voice that you hear in your head when you trade, your coach, your critic. So the anti-self might say something like, after you've blown your account, might be like, why even bother trying again? You'll never succeed anyway. You just proved that you suck at this. You don't have the energy or the time to learn how to do it properly anyway. You've lost enough money. You're just gonna blow it up. You're gonna have to go back to flipping burgers at McDonald's, get out the McDonald's application. The anti-self or the shadow self may be saying those things, but the idealized self, which you have control over, you either have to tell them to pipe up, you have to look at the shoulder and be like, what do you have to say about this? Or you're only hearing constant negativity, right? So the idealized self might be encouraging and give you the voice of the inner coach, saying things like, why not try again? Maybe you should find a new approach, a practical perspective. You may have lost some money, but have you lost your ability to make money? If you want this, don't give up. It's a rite of passage. People do this. You aren't the only person this has happened to. Reach out and tell other people what happened so they can support you. Other people have been through this before you. Yes, this was maybe a mistake, but it was a successful failure because you learned from it, even if you lost money. So you're going to always have these two voices in your head, and you're going to have to learn which to balance. And if you're only listening to one or the other, then you're imbalanced. So how do we stop self-sabotage? I have an exercise here and we'll go through that in a minute, but actually, let me pull it up separately. Thanks for the patience, guys, with the trolls in chat. Did not have the patience for that much today, but I appreciate your assistance. So if anything I've been saying is resonating with you and you see it in your trading or you've seen it in your life, what are the steps that you can take to help yourself actively stop this, whether it's active or passive self-sabotage? The first step is always recognizing that it's what you're doing, right? You don't want to live in the river in Egypt, denial. And step two is accept that at one point your behavior had a function that served you. There's a reason why you feel and think and speak and act the way that you do. And a large portion of that is because of things that were outside of your control. So some people who are self-sabotagers are actually also control freaks because, or you have the illusion control bias issue because you strongly feel like you have to have an active role now in controlling your environment, your world, how things play out, etc. But that's an imbalance, right? And so what you can do is look at how this function, how you lacked having a say in your childhood, or let's use as an example, but then as a trader and as a person now as an adult, you micromanage people. Well, you're exacerbating that function and that behavior that served you in the past, and you took it one step too far. So what we have to do now is realize that this behavior or thought pattern that has been occurring and self-sabotaging our life, although it served us, it's now a deterrence and it's okay to let it go. So you got to tell yourself, like, thank you for, growing a pair and being able to speak up for yourself in the future. That was helpful. Or thank you for learning how to advocate for your needs. Or thank you for learning to respect people's privacy because your parents definitely didn't, right? If that was your thing. So next, we learn the difference in our voice between your anti-self or best self, which I just talked about. Understanding that your anti-self is self-sabotage and your best self or your idealized version of yourself is your self-disciplined voice. Those are very important. Next, you want to separate from these negative traits from your parents or your influential caretakers, your mentors, your coaches, etc., that you have mistakenly taken on as your own. A lot of times we just bumble through life. We're just wandering through life and hoping things will work out for us and maybe not actively thinking or asking ourselves, who am I? Right? You might not have ever sat down and written out, what are my values? What are my ideals? What are my beliefs? What do I stand for in life? Who am I as a person? And so when you're starting this series on emotional and psychological analysis, I always tell you it's like pulling up underneath a car hood, and you have to do a diagnosis and understand what's going on underneath. After you do that, which is looking at these negative traits we may have inherited or self-sabotaging behaviors that we did in order to serve ourselves when we were not in control of ourselves, what is your next step? Your next step is then to decide who it is you want to be and start taking those actions and doing those behaviors that are getting you into the right direction. So if you were a trader who blows accounts and you were a trader who does not make trade plans and you were a trader who YOLO'd half of your portfolio on one play or things of that nature, who is it that you want to be? Because you can't separate from this old version of yourself who's blowing money, hemorrhaging money left and right, unless you decide, I want to be a disciplined trader. I want to be somebody who, can chart. I want to be somebody who understands how to do fundamental analysis. I want to understand cryptocurrency so that when somebody says, what's the difference between a token and a coin? You can tell them the difference between a token and a coin, right? Whomever or whatever it is that you want to be, you have to decide that for yourself. Your next step, I'll go through that. Let me go through that activity right now, actually. So this exercise is something that I adapted from the Overwhelmed, is it the Overwhelmed Brain? Yes, it's a book called The Overwhelmed Brain. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the author right now, but essentially it can take you through journal prompts that are peeling back the layers of why you self-sabotage shit, right? So the first step is you are going to list some of the traits that you saw in those adults or whomever raised you that you said as a child, I never want to do or be like that. If you were somebody who didn't have parents or caretakers in your life, or if you're somebody who doesn't want to delve into the realm of family stuff in order to get good at being a trader, then I want you to replace where it says parents or caretakers with traders. This could be the YouTube Moon Boys. These can be Discord people. This can be, Twitch streamers. List some of the traits that you saw from Twitch streamers, Moon Boys, Discord people, Telegram groups, etc., that you saw and you said, I never want to do or be like that. So some examples might be YOLOing, degenning, not having a trade plan, longing the top, right? Long the resistance. Next is, which one of these traits do you embody in some way? So you saw all these people do other things and you're like, I'm never going to be like that. Or I don't know how this person deals with getting liquidated 10 times a month. I never want to be like that. Go through your list of traits and then be honest with yourself and say, which one of these traits do I embody? Which ones have I actually seen in my trading experience? These journaling exercises, guys, they're going to be listed in Academy resources. And what you do is you go file, make a copy, and then you do it on your own, or you print it out as a PDF and write it out. And the whole point is, and you can share this with me if you ever want to talk to me about it in DMs. My DMs are always open. But if you can't be honest with yourself on paper, in a journal prompt or in a Google Doc, then you got some serious issues. All right. Issues that CT Academy cannot help you with. I'm happy to refer you to people, but you need to be able to be honest with yourself. So if you list Moon Boys and you have seen that you have Moon Boy behavior in your traits, then list it here. Because your next step is, how did these traits serve you in the past? Did feeling or thinking or acting this way protect you or make you feel safe? Maybe not even just making you feel safe, but making you feel powerful or in control. If you keep these traits alive and you keep perpetuating these actions, what will happen? Could they harm you? Could they put you in unsafe situations, or you could blow your account, lose your money, lose your relationship, or prevent you from achieving your goals? Notice how this is like a stop sign, right? It's like a halt, and then we're moving forward, and then we're letting it go, right? In the green, what I want you to do is recognize you are likely not around the same people anymore. If these were parents, coaches, whatever in your childhood, in your life, then these are people whom may have, you likely don't spend a lot of time with around anymore. So what you have to do in order to move forward is you have to let your old self die in order to give birth to your new self, the one that will make you the best trader and person you can be. In this section, this is where you're going to list your own values, your own ideals, your own beliefs. You're choosing the person you want to be. You're going to be the guy that uses proper risk management. You're going to be the person who only does 2% stop losses or whatever the case may be, right? You're going to be you're not going to be a person who does 100x. You're going to be the person who does 5x max. And then after when everybody's in bear market and crying about how capitulation washed them out, you can be the guy who comes in and says, spot is king, right? Whoever it is that you want to be, choose that for yourself. If you don't know what traits you want, list what you want to see in your trading and then work backwards. So for some of you, when you go through these sort of behaviors, it's either easier to identify and apply specifically to a trading situation or specifically to other arenas in your life. Either way, they're going to bleed together. So do what comes to you first, do brainstorming, and then figure out the details later. So an example I put here for working backwards, right, with the trading stuff was, I want to be a person, I want to be a trader who cuts my trades at the point I determine as my PT or stop loss without fear or hesitation. What is it that I need to do or have in order to make that a reality? I have to have self-discipline. How do I implement that self-discipline in order to get that outcome I'm desiring? I need to be a person who makes trade plans and be the person who follows them, okay? So you stop self-sabotage by doing those steps. That activity will be in the server later. So for those of you who are joining me tonight because you have already blown up an account, which for most people who are traders, this is, like I said earlier, a rite of passage, unfortunately, because you have to learn your lessons the hard way. A thorn of experience is worth a field of warning. What do you do now? The first thing you're going to do is understand that you got to face the music. This is the part where my tough love Comedy Central roast of CT, Hall of Flame comes in because I'm not going to be nice to you about what it is that you need to do. If you don't go through these steps, you're just going to keep perpetuating the same cycles. All right. So if you just recently blew up an account, as soon as it happens, you just need to start writing some shit down. You got to start journaling because you need to understand the emotions that you're feeling, the biases you had, what you were thinking, why you went into the trade. You want to analyze everything. And things change in hindsight because we have a hindsight bias. So the sooner you can get to journaling ASAP after you've blown up your account, the better. The more time you wait, it's going to be a little bit harder. You need to ask yourself and find out, get to the root of why did it happen. If you can understand from a logical point, I blew my account because I had too much exposure of my capital. I risked 20% and I didn't have a stop loss. I had a mental stop loss and just ran that shit to liquidation. Then you can understand that from a logical point. But I hope you hear that there's psychological factors behind that that you need to do some reflection on in order to heal, right? Take a breather from the market. Time in the market is more important than timing the market. All right. If you don't take a step back, you're not giving yourself a chance to heal. You really have have something that you need to, it's like an open, fresh wound. You might not be able to see it, but your P&L definitely reflects it. You need to take a step back and work on that wellness wheel and give some attention to other areas of your life to feel balanced before you come back into the game. And then what you need to do is make some new rules for yourself. Maybe you were a person who already had rules. Maybe you're a person who had rules but didn't follow them. Maybe you started to make rules, but you never did much with them. Whatever the case may be, you got to make some new ones. It's time to revisit the rule book, right? We got to reiterate the fundamentals. So logical and emotional rules. I have examples of emotional rules in lesson 1 video if you want to look at some of mine. And logical rules, I can share my day trading rules to you or with you as well. Next is you got to get back up on the horse at some point in time. If you just sit back and you do all of this analysis, but then you never get back in the ring, you're going to be that person who's stuck in analysis paralysis. You're afraid of acting because you're afraid that you're going to perpetuate cycles, which is passive self-sabotage because you're telling yourself you aren't good enough to learn. And that's cap. We all know that's cap. So what you can do is you can paper trade or you can observe, do some active charting, be around in the server, look at what some other people are doing, do some back testing. And then once you've done these steps, here's the harsh point. I told you I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. Here's the harsh point. You need to ask yourself and decide, do I want to continue as a trader? Yes or no? I'm not being, facetious. It's not a game. Do you want to continue? Because if you are going to get better at something, like if you're riding a bike for the first time, you don't have your training wheels, you fall off and you get scraped up. You're trying to skateboard and you do a kickflip and you just eat it down an 8 stair and you're bleeding. Are you going to get back up? How bad do you want to be a skater? How bad do you want to ride the bike? Do you want to continue? Yes or no? Without the passion, if you're too defeated, this is when you need to stay at step 2. You got to take some more time for yourself, okay? If you're feeling like, yes, I want to, then you got to get back on the horse and keep it moving. Trading is not for everybody. Everybody wants it to be for them because everybody loves the idea of instant gratification, making loads of money, things coming easily to you in life. But you quickly learn as soon as you try trading that it's not all, it's not a cakewalk, right? It's not rainbows, puppies, unicorns, and butterflies. So ask yourself honestly, do you want to continue? Yes or no? If yes, the answer is to not give up. Focus on your education, learn some new strategies, master a strategy that works for you, find your style, do some of that reflecting work. If no, then okay. Right? Like we'll miss you. This is always going to be here. Just like the market's always going to be here. There's not a certain time that you have to come in. It's okay if you don't want to. I've known people, actually the person who wrote Peter Brandt wrote Diary of a Professional Commodities Trader. And at one point in time, he went from being on the CBOT to going 15 years without trading. He had kids and stuff like that. And he was like, oh, I'll get back to it when there's some semblance of normal. To 15 years, the guy went without trading. Then he came back, was a goat in the game, wrote some books, made that money. It's okay. like the whole concept of trading and timing markets is bullshit. There's always going to be something for you to come back and trade. So do you want to continue? Yes or no? Be honest with yourself. Okay. If no, go make some money elsewhere. Practice, just give up your time to make that money, and then you can invest it down the road, right? If you aren't sure, if you waffle, if you waver, if you're on the fence, then do what you do when you're not sure about a trade. You can hedge, right? Just put in less money. If you're making $5,000 a month, maybe you only put in $1,000 instead of $2,500 into your trading account, right? Use a little less capital and go with a little more education. 75% education, 25% capital. You can switch this around on yourself. Remember when we went through the bias lesson, what we said about the people who never take action, right? That's lesson 2 if you need a reminder. The next thing you need to do in facing the music, and this is the hardest part for some people, is be honest with those around you about what happened. This is the hardest part, because if you don't tell people what happened to you, if you don't express what you're feeling and what you're thinking, like, man, I blew up my account, because you're so afraid of what other people are going to think about you, then what you're doing is you are going to implode. Think about lesson 1 when we talked about express, repressed, and depressed, right? Emotion is energy emotion. You have to get it out. You are going to harbor some serious guilt and shame and bad vibes if you don't put it out there that this happened to you. If you continue on and you want to appear like you're a god to everybody, but really you just lost $25,000, your friends or other people in your life are going to be like, what's going on with this person? Because people aren't dumb. They can see and know what's happening with you, and they want to be there to support you. So you owe it to the people in your life to be honest with them about what happened. And the cool thing is that by being honest, you might be surprised about who slides in your DMs and then says, don't worry, that happened to me too. Or you might have a mentor come out of the woodworks and tell you the truth. So some of you might not know this about me, but my parents were traders. They met while working at a brokerage. And my dad never gave me any support with my trading when I first started out. He was like, you gotta learn it the hard way. And when I lost my first, I think I lost my first like legit 10 grand, and I didn't tell him. I wanted him to think the world of me. I wanted him to think I was a baller ass trader. I wanted him to think I was like following in his footsteps, whatever. And then when I had the guts to tell him like that, like, I fucked up, I lost a lot of money. I was just risking capital left and right, playing it loosey goosey. He didn't even tell me this in this scenario. He just listened, right? What he told me that next week was, you know what, Amy, in, like the 80s or the 90s or whatever, I lost $10,000, and $10,000 was way more back then than what you lost now. And I went and I told my dad, and it took me like, 6 months to admit to him what I had done. And he gave him capital to fund himself again, went through, somebody had faith in him, and then he got back on his feet. But my dad, who actively knew that I had been trying to trade for years, when I finally had the courage to come to him and, and be like, I messed up, then it was only then that he told me, hey, I've messed up too. And he threw me a bone. He threw me a little more money to get back on my feet. And not everybody has that opportunity, right? But when you do that, that is just like the best feeling in the world, because you go from feeling like a failure to having people support you and tell you that I went through this too, and you're not alone. So there's a phrase in relations management that says vulnerability is a magic wand of disclosure. So by being honest and forthright with people, you're actually going to open up the opportunity for them to be honest and forthright with you back. But if you are a person who is not open with others, you are not going to get other people to be open with you. It's like a magnet, like how ends attract, right? And if you can't trust, you can't be trusted. So if you want to have people around you who are honest with you, you have to start by being honest. I also have, I put more of my story on X Trade side to go with number 6, because I had some things like I dug myself out of debt, and then I partied for a year. Like I had a condo, I had everything, fully paid off car, all this other shit. And then I just partied for a year and wrecked myself and then had to start all over. And when I shared that with people, and I did it in X Trades where, I'm an academy coach too. And like I had more than, I'm sure more than 30 DMs who, did this really happen to you? Yeah. And that's just like the surface level, right? So everybody's going through it, but because nobody talks about it, everybody feels alone. So when people who are in the server say things like, I blew up my account, don't come for them. If you're going to do anything, slide an encouraging DM or something their way, because for every one person who comes out here admitting that they blew their account, there are 9 other people in the shadows, in the woodworks, who don't have the confidence to come out and share and spill their own tea. So props to the people who come out here like, yeah, I learned my lesson on liquidations, right? Like, even if they aren't afraid of what other people are thinking of them. So don't give them a reason to feel that way, right? Support self-discipline instead of encouraging self-sabotage. Another way to do this is by trading less. After you come back into the game, be pickier. This is the best advice I can give anybody, any market ever, period, is just trade less. Because if you're trading less, you're pickier, you're looking for optimal trade entries only, you're giving yourself time to practice proper risk management. The number one reason a lot of my mentees tell me with trade plans, why they don't do them is I don't have time, because the entry is already passed. You can just hear it and feel it, like the panic, the FOMO, and you got to just be like, shh, this is why you got to chart, sit back, wait for the trade to come to you, and trade less. I know people who trade once, twice, 5 times a month, and they'll be more profitable than the people who are trading, 1 or 5 things a day. Less is more. It's a fact of life in many areas. Last but not least, you got to accept, forgive yourself, and move on. All right. So the keys to facing the music, you got to get it out, figure out why it happened. You got to decide whether or not you want to keep going. And if you want to keep going, you got to be honest, and you got to build yourself up for success by making those rules, right? Here's the last bit of harsh truth. Don't want to put this out there in a way that's going to, like shatter any egos, but if you blew non-discretionary funds, you don't need to be trading right now. Whether or not you want to continue, yes or no, I would say please don't. Please don't. If you are trading with money that you can't afford to lose, if you couldn't go turn around and light it on fire and you lost that money, then your education and your time for focusing on education, please spend it on budgeting. All right, learn about some savings, getting out of debt if you need to. You need to be at ground zero, floor up, fundamentals of risk management lesson with Stefan 101, where he says, have your bills paid, cover your ass, right? Have a little bit more money to blow, and then you start investing. And it's not a matter of, if you want to do it now and you want to do this investing thing right this minute, but you aren't in the right place where you don't have that debt managed, you don't have, that 3 to 6 month emergency savings fund built up, then you're building a house on an improper foundation, and it's going to collapse, and you're going to make shit twice as worse for yourself. So I mean this with love, and I'm saying this as somebody who's been there. If you've blown an account and you're going through these steps and you still want to trade, that's great. That's great. But like, take some time for yourself. Take a breather. Get that foundation right. Okay. Until you can light that money on fire, you can paper trade if you want. You can do this in TradingView. You can do this on some brokerages. You can just hang out in servers and be a sponge and like absorb all the knowledge. But please don't get back into this until you've done these steps. All right. So Squid Game. Love it. Homeboy's family over here, his family all knew that he was a gambler, right? They were all disappointed in him. They didn't trust him with money, all this other stuff, because he was honest about who he was. He put it out there that, I gamble, I lose this shit, I still love my daughter, all this other stuff, but I'm not, good at this. I got this problem. But then you had the other dude who was supposedly like he worked for, I don't know, a brokerage or capital management firm, right? And he lost people billions of dollars. When he explains in Squid Games, if you haven't seen it, the TLDR is he explains, so they go into this game to get their debts paid off. This dude had debts from gambling. Everybody knew his problems. This dude was like the prestigious Ivy League school grad that everybody was proud of. They thought he worked as a hedgie, and really he literally lost people billions of dollars by leveraging and getting liquidated on a bunch of shit. So in the end of times, when the Squid Game, when people come out, you know, whose family is shocked that they were there? This dude's family, not his. So for some people, the hardest part about failing is telling others that we failed, but different forms of self-sabotage can lead to the same consequences, right? Whose self-sabotages were actually easier to fix in this scenario? His, because he was more open and honest with them, because other people could see them. It's if you have a wound inside of you, right? A mental or an emotional wound. If you have a wound, but people can't see it, they don't know to help. If you're walking around with a broken arm, right? You're Kevin Ware in that Louisville game with a leg bone sticking out. People are going to know to come help you, and they want to come help you. It's in our nature to be helpful. But if you're hiding and suffering with it on the inside, and then you're like, why is nobody helping me? Why is nobody noticing that this, or I can't tell people about this? You're actually going to fester the wound because nobody's going to come help you clean it. It's a little Squid Game action for you. So common beginner lessons. I want to tell you, if you're feeling like shit because I'm over here, man, I'm a big self-sabotager. You might not be as big of a self-sabotager as you think you are. You might just have gone through those periods of initiation, like I was talking to. It's like hazing, almost like we're all in a frat, right? At BTFD University. There are some common beginner lessons that you go through that they're actually designed to help you work through your self-sabotage issues, right? To get over it, to put the proper things in place. It's a rite of passage that if you can trade 3 to 5 years and turn yourself from a loser into a net profit, you know, having your own style things, then that's when you deserve the letters, right? So take what the market is willing to give you, or the market will take all that you are willing to give it. That's lesson numero uno, muchachos. All right. Some of the first lessons that you're going to come through that you may not be as much of a self-sabotager as you think you are, right? Going at it alone. So I mentioned my dad was a trader. In his time when they traded, this was when people eat, sleep, breathe trading. They would get to the office at the butt crack of dawn and they would stay forever. And they did everything together. They're trading together. They're going to lunch together. There are people around to talk about everything all the time. And if you're losing, or if a client gets mad at you, or whatever happens, you can't hide it from people. So they were all honest with one another. So I mentioned last week, vasopressin in men, when you go through hardships together, it's actually bonding. And the majority of traders are men. But so when you go through hardships together, like this is why Army veterans and stuff, they are so bonded together. These are my brothers, right? It's the same stuff with trading. You feel like you went through a war, but it's like a mental, emotional, physical, psychological exhaustion, more so than, actively risking your life, right? So a common beginner lesson is trying to put all this on your back, not reaching out to other people and talking to other people about what's going on, not engaging in the community and allowing yourself to have the community experience. Because if you can learn from the mistakes of others, you will expedite your growth. Another thing is opening orders in illiquid markets, not understanding volume or how liquidity works. Too much size on an order, having too big, or putting in all of a position at once instead of scaling in, or overstaying your hand. Like in poker, people can get greedy. People cannot take the exits that are offered to them. Ignoring market sentiment. Once you have your strategy and you see a trade setup, if you aren't looking high time frame, if you're not realizing, oh, we're in a war, it's a recession, blah blah blah. If you think, I'm only going to trade the charts. The charts are the only thing that matters. Sometimes this stuff can really go against you. So it's important to have a holistic perspective and a balanced perspective, right? So that's a common beginner lesson, is ignoring general market sentiment because the trend is your friend. Next one is trading outside of your means. That kind of goes with risking too much capital, not using the proper risk management, but more so what I was saying before about discretionary funds, okay? Or YOLOing in without doing your due diligence, or riding the coattails of an analyst somewhere, right? So some of these, if you've been experiencing these, know that this is common beginner shit. And the sooner that you admit it, other people will surprise you right? They will come through, and people you admire, people you want to emulate yourself after will be able to say, I went through this too. Here's what I did to get through it, right? Allow yourself to lean on other people. Trading is a marathon, not a sprint. It is an upstream swim against emotions, right? You are battling so much here. You're trying to learn a new field. You're trying to master a new skill. You're trying to master your emotions. If you want to learn about the kind of person you are, you just need to become a trader. I swear to God. But what you need to do is change your mindset from being a trader, right, into being a risk manager, because this is going to be that difference between that equity curve of up, down, which is akin to your emotional state of being up, down, ups, down, and unstable, right? To a risk manager that's like, I have a baseline. I'm going to steadily build. Might be a little dips in here and there, but I'll keep getting back on the horse, right? I want you to change your mindset from so Stefan in his lessons, he says, how much am I willing to make curiously, and how much am I willing to lose? Instead of saying, how do I make money when you come into these markets? How do I make money? How am I going to get the land? When Lambo, right? How do I make money? I want you to think instead, how do I last? We want to go for endurance. It's a marathon, not a sprint. How do I last? If I have this passion for trading and I want to do this and I want to get good at this, I know it's going to take time. How do I last in this field? You don't necessarily have to, I don't really want you to be like, how much can I lose? How much can I lose? How much can I lose? Because you can see now that that's perpetuating a negative thought pattern or scarcity mindset. Whereas just thinking, how do I last, is acknowledging and accepting in and of itself of, I acknowledge there will be ups and downs. I want to last, right? I'll have some laps where I PR, other laps where I trip and fall. How do I last? Because it's not your down periods that define you. If you are feeling really beat down, not just with current market conditions, but blown accounts, all that other stuff, I want you to understand that your down periods don't define you. How you got to this place doesn't define you. It's how you get back up, or if you get back up. How you manage your down periods define you. If you're a person who's self-isolating, you are not being upfront about what happened, or you are not taking the time to analyze what happened and trying to make it better, then what is that saying about your character? You're a person who doesn't trust people. You're a person who is perpetuating the things of that might not be good for me, but it feels comfortable, right? You haven't maybe addressed old wounding or old patterns that you thought helped you get through adversity as a kid that you're now choosing to do as an adult. But if you have the bravery and the courage to change your life, your actions, your thoughts, your decisions, your beliefs, then these down periods won't define you. This will be like big dips. These will be like bear markets. These will be like little corrections on your overall chart of what you're learning, how you're gaining, all of that stuff. And you have to think of it back like that. Think about in yourself, if you're a student at Buy the Dip University, you got to buy the dip on yourself. You got to be like, all right, I hit rock bottom. I'm at a weekly or a monthly support. I'm at a yearly support because I lost so much money. This is the time for me. I can't go all in and invest with my money, but I can invest in myself with my time and my effort and my energy and my intention to get better. That's how you got to think about yourself. Buy the dip on yourself. So Peter Brandt, that commodities trader I was telling you about who stopped for 15 years, when he came back to the game, he made up this concept of the longevity cake. So I'm here to share with you the longevity cake recipe. Everybody wants to eat the cake, but nobody wants to make it. So if you want to enjoy this cake, you got to make it for yourself, right? The secret ingredient here on this cake is that you need to manage your risk. We beat this to death, but it is the number one reason why people lose money. It is also the number one reason why people make money, right? If you're taking a stop loss of 2%, if you lose 10 times in a row, you've only lost 20% of your account. If you're taking a stop loss of 10% and you lose 10 times in a row, you've blown your account, right? So you need to manage your risk. Nobody wants to hear it, even less want to do it. But look where not doing it has gotten you. In a lesson with me, learning about, no, I'm just playing. So with the cake euphemism, we also want to remember that cakes are made with layers. We want to be layering into our trades and layering out of our trades. This is why any chart you see will likely have multiple PTs, multiple areas for scaling in your entries. This is a protective measure for you. This is a hedge. If you have a good plan, you are not getting into one position at one time. You are layering in and layering out. When it comes to trade and direction, so I meant to say timing and direction here. These are the other layers on your longevity cake. You want to have the timing of when to get into a trade and knowing which asset to pick, and then understanding the direction, whether you think it will go up or down. If we're making it super simple, this is all it takes, is mastering the timing or direction. When it comes to timing or direction, if you've got one of these wrong, you've likely got the trade wrong. If you have the direction wrong, your timing could have been perfect or whatever the case may be, but this can crumble underneath and wreck the cake, right? And vice versa. So think about this cake as your portfolio, and and if you've ever seen like Cake Boss and those other shows, like the Great British Baking Show or whatever, and anything where they'll drive with the cake in the car to bring it to the venue and they don't want it to knock over and they have to drive all careful. That's what I want you to think about your longevity cake. Your longevity cake is your portfolio, and you're driving in Florida where people drive like crazy, or Colombia. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Medellin, but that is the scariest shit I've ever seen in my life. So you're driving the car, you've got your cake on board, you need to protect it. It's got to come through here unscathed. Last but not least, this is the staircase. If you've never been to the Vatican in Rome, this is a staircase there. And if you like and enjoy the Fibonacci sequence and spirals and how they show up in architecture and math and all these science, all these beautiful things like I do, the staircase is here to remind you that, okay, you might have been learning some of the same lessons over and over again in your life. You might have been self-sabotaging for a long time. When you go through that cycle, I don't want you to think about, oh, I'm going through this again, right? Each time you're leveling up because you will have learned something from the previous time. And even if you have to go through that lesson again in your life, even if it's brought back around to teach you a karmic lesson about yourself, about your trading, what you're supposed to be doing or not supposed to be doing, you have a better perspective now than you did previously. You have history to go off of. You can ask yourself, well, what did I do in that situation? Did I like how that played out? Would I have done things differently? So that when it comes back around, and it will come back around, and you will be tested in your life many times, often on the same things over and over again. Until you break the cycle, you're going to have this pattern, having this spiral staircase. So that's the lesson for this week on self-sabotage. If you want to take on some growth tasks and do some self-discipline to improve, the first thing you can do is take a long, hard look in the mirror. I say that jokingly and facetiously, but I would advise you to work on another wellness area. This could be the one that you've been avoiding. If you really want to challenge yourself, you should have done at least one nice thing for yourself in like 5 different areas by now. So I hope you've been doing that. The self-sabotage exercise or the self-discipline exercise are really, really worth it, guys. I'm giving you like free mindset coaching by doing these activities, and it's all academically based. On the right-hand side, if you were interested in what I was talking about with Carl Jung and the shadow self, we have this front that people have, that we put forth for people called the persona. This is our ego. This is the ego, the devil on our shoulder, the one we want the outer world to see us as something. And then our animus or our anima, our shadow self, our inner animal of who we really are in our internal world is our shadow self. It's the other side. The ego is actually, I said that was the devil's side, but that's more the angel side, surprisingly, because you want to appear as such, right? So if you're interested in those things I was talking about and learning and reading more about that, literally read anything by Carl Jung. If you're interested in the TLDR 1.5 hours, I can get it done. Trading in the Zone by Mark Douglas, available via YouTube audiobook. It's free. There's multiple PDF copies in both servers. Diary of a Professional Commodity Trader, which I mentioned a few times, by Peter Brandt. There is mentorship available if you're interested. Reach out to Birkenstock and the community. Don't forget to use this community for what you want it to be. You can reach out and talk to people. You can DM people. Most people on staff are very open to responding to people, even if they aren't able to fully provide mentorship at this time. The last book I didn't put on here, but it is incredibly, insanely good. Highly 10 out of 10 would recommend, is called The Overwhelmed Brain. I'm going to actually look up who made it, but I want to say it's available on Amazon. It's a paperback for like $5. And if you're somebody who identifies as not a control freak, but an overthinker, a critical thinker, it's by Paul Colaiani. Paul Colaiani, The Overwhelmed Brain, Personal Growth for Critical Thinkers, helping you make decisions, all that good stuff. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns? etc.
Yeah,
B-roller, you're
I'm
the
just
best.
joining now. Please, can you help me and just refresh a bit? I'm just joining the class now.
Hey, I'm sorry. I was talking over you at the beginning. Would you be so kind as to repeat your question, please? Sorry, T. Hardy, I didn't hear you.
I said I'm just joining the class now and I'm just in, so I don't really understand anything right now. So please, can you refresh what you have been taught?
Yeah, for sure. So I just ended, man. So I have it recording. I will be posting it in Academy Chat and Academy resources because there's a little too much to sum up. But if you want to send me a message in the chat of what your username is in the server, I'll be sure to @ you that or send you the link in DM, okay?
Okay, no problem.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, B-Rolla, for adding that
Okay.
link to that book. What's up, Sylvanus? How can I help you?
Okay. I want to also get access to the previous video because this is with section 4 of the training.
Yeah, so our academy is open to all of the trialists and everything right now. So even though the previous recordings weren't made available to you, if it would be helpful, I'll go ahead and put those in main chat after this. Sound like a plan, Stan?
Okay, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions? Lilliput, thank you for your kind words. Ali, thank you for your kind words. I apologize, guys. We got off to a rough start because I wasn't really teaching in the zone, but shh. Gotta love the haters. Turn your haters into congratulators. Thanks again. I will be putting all of these activities, resources, etc., in Academy Resources, Academy Chat, and then main chat for my trialist homies who were able to join tonight. Thank you again for your time, guys. I feel hopeful for your growth, and you aren't the only one who has impersonators, Winfred. That's imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. So looking forward to next lesson on this.
But
Alrighty.
the lesson is too short. I think it's too short. Is there anything you want to still teach us apart from, because actually now seeing what they call the outer world, the personal, the ego, the self,
Mhm.
the shadow, the minimum, the internal world. I don't really understand what this is all about. And gold tax, a long hard look in the mirror. I don't really understand. Please, can you come again on this?
Yeah, so when I'm suggesting people take a long, hard look in the mirror at themselves, what I'm suggesting is just reflection. It's just like English euphemism and slang language for like, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Look at and identify your areas for growth and improvement. For the right-hand side, this Carl Jung, the model of the psyche that I included, it's not something that I went into deep in the lesson. It's just something for if it interested in you to follow up and do your own research. If you are interested in it more, and I noticed you said my lesson was a little too short, I appreciate that feedback. That's something I can try and incorporate and weave into future lessons to help dive into that a little bit more. Unfortunately, I don't have more time tonight to go over it per se, but I will go ahead and link additional resources to the things that I'm including for you to do those activities on that can help you with understanding your persona and your anima, your inner self and your outer self. I have this removing self-sabotage exercise that I made. And then I also have a self-discipline structure exercise that I have all the directions for here, so you can read at your leisure. I have a journaling exercise here for you to help identify things you dislike doing, things you don't feel like you can do, things you've never done before, things you might enjoy, with ultimately the goals of breaking the cycle. Our main goal here is to break our old bad patterns, things we're doing and perpetuating so that people think we are something that we're not. And then when at the end of the day, when you have to the phrase, I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase, how can you sleep at night?
Sure.
Right, that looking at yourself, you want to be doing the inner work here because that's going to show on the outer world. So I'm happy to include more resources for sure. And I thank you for your feedback.
Yeah, also thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Really appreciate it.
It feels good to hear that. Thank you so much for your kind words. The recording will be available in the server. I'll put it in main chat. It's going to take a while for it to upload all that good stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share. Actually, let me show you one more thing. So this guy right here was linked in the chat. I'm not sure if you want it, but we were talking about risk management a lot tonight. And if this is something that will help you, you might also want to just screenshot it now if that's something that you're interested in. But essentially, it's capital exposure and risk
Hold
management
on, hold on, hold on.
guidelines.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, about the risk management, have you taken the class before? Like, have you taught them about risk management or do this first time? Because I'll really, really be interested in that particular topic.
This is my first time going over the topic of self-sabotage. However, this is the 4th lesson in a longer series. And so you will have 3 other hours of similar content to digest if you really want to get some more.
Yeah, I really want to get more. Like, I can't. Well, thank you so much for today.
Of course.